Yeah, so as we get a couple people tuning in, I see we have a couple cohorts. Shelly popping in, Dill, BTC Alchemist, appreciate you. Let's talk a little bit about your background, specifically within Petaverse, and give us a brief overview of what Petaverse is. What are you guys working on there, and what is like the general outlook of the project itself?
Sure. I guess like the best way to start is to explain that I've been in video games for half my life now, about 25 years. And I've worked with my partner, Lee, my husband, throughout that, the entirety of that. We spent probably the most like pivotal, famous bit of our careers at Take-Two, where Lee was a producer on some of the Grand Theft Auto titles and designer on Bully. I started on the Rockstar side, and then I ultimately started 2K Games and 2K Sports with the CEO of Take-Two. So I signed things like Bioshock and Borderlands and Lost for Axis and Civ and XCOM and stuff like that. Like basically like laid out the foundation for what 2K is.
Yeah, basically our childhood.
I'm getting a lot of that these days. So like, how much time I lost on your games? It's like I was the person who signed Bioshock on a one-page pitch, and I signed Borderlands on a verbal pitch at E3, many years ago.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. Yeah, continue.
That could be a podcast in and of itself, just explaining.
Yeah, I definitely have questions on that for sure.
2K reported to Rockstar for a period of time. Like the insanity of how that came together is like many books in and of itself. Anyway, that's where we came from. And Lee and I left Take-Two, and we spent like a decade doing our own thing. Lee is very strong, is on the design side. I'm on the production and business side. And so between us, we had a really good partnership. And we signed Doctor Who rights. We did a Doctor Who free-to-play game early on in free-to-play. I did a few million installs. And then we navigated into augmented reality. And then last year, on the back of, we were interested in blockchain, but not to develop on. We were interested, in Ethereum and where things were going. We had, a couple decades of game development experience behind us. And then we spent 4 years with a few £1 million of British government money messing in augmented reality with the guys who created Wallace and Gromit. And last year, the story was I went walking with Lee and I said, could we get a cat up and running in a space and do some cool shit in AR, like get the cat jumping up on tables and running off around the corner and all these cool things that we knew were possible in AR, but no one was doing them. I'm like, but how could we do that and not have it matter whether anyone was ready for AR yet or when AR glasses are coming or what? And Lee said to me, if we thought about this in a Web3 sense and we weren't focused on what experience specifically we wanted these pets to have, then yeah, we could take them everywhere. And so early last year, while everyone was focusing on play to earn and tokenomics and all this stuff, we were this sort of squeaky wheel in the corner saying, you know what, there's a lot more interesting going on here than just that. Interoperability is way more possible than people think it is. If you build on one of the major engines, we're built on Unity. And if you make the interpretation of that data open, reinterpretable, and if you're cross-blockchain, then interoperability becomes immediately possible. And so that's what Petaverse is really about. We're game developers. We have 25 people. We're VC backed. And we know how to make cool stuff. But this isn't specifically a Web3 gaming project. It's something more primitive than that. We're about the pets themselves or any interactive, sort of object and how you can take it between blockchains, between games, and make it resilient to changes in technology over the coming decades. That in a nutshell is what we believe in and what we're trying to do. We think Web3 is about ownership, interoperability, and composability. And I'm going to keep beating those drums until people start to come on board. And I think they are. Like no one says play to earn anymore without, sort of being facetious.
Yeah. We often hear the conversation of interoperability, but usually it comes with a land sell, right? They're really trying to sell you on the dream, which becomes difficult because we're starting to see that not a lot of these metaverse are adaptable to the assets that people actually want to bring in.
Well, people don't know what interoperability means. Like a good example is the Yuga Adidas announcement, which was really cool. However, I haven't seen any clarity yet on how they intend to make that interoperability work. And that's really important. You can't, like, they're big, meaty problems to solve there, which we think we have a solution to that we set out in our white paper. You can't just say things are going to be interoperable. You have to figure out how they're going to be. So in our case, we created an open standard for metadata. Like, we want everyone to do this. We're not trying to be behind a walled garden and say, we're going to do this every way. Don't you wish you'd come up with this yourselves? No, we actually want everyone to work this way. And we say, if we could all agree on what information needs to be in the metadata for an interactive, pet, for example, or a car, or a robot or a zombie or whatever, if we can all agree on that, then it makes it really easy for us to reinterpret each other's projects. If you can, instead of bridging and focusing on one specific blockchain, if you can make it possible to use your stuff everywhere, and if you can make it open to reinterpretation, then all of this is immediately possible. And but you have to have that plan. You can't just say it's going to be interoperable. And I see a lot of projects saying they're going to be interoperable without explaining how.
Got it. So over at Petaverse, are you guys mainly focused on just working on 3D or AR digital assets, or is it going to be something that you can interact with? Will it be a type of game in and of itself? What is tied to these pets that we're going to be minting?
So all of these things, right? So our mint is going to be cats, and we already have the second type of pet, which is not cats, in development, and the third already in concept art stage. So cats are just the beginning. But when you unbox your pet, you're going to get a 2D PFP, which we haven't revealed yet. You're going to get the 3D assets themselves. You'll get a video that shows you meeting your 3D pet for the first time. And you'll immediately get access to an app that we call the Memetron, which is an AR enhanced mobile experience, mobile and WebGL. And it basically allows you to create shareable content with your unique pet. So you can take it into your space with you in AR. You can create these cool moments and share them to social media. But that's just showing like the first use case. And already it's, ahead of most experiences out there in terms of what AR means and what AR is capable of. But beyond that, we have a VR experience in development that will come out soon after the AR mobile app. And that introduces spaces in VR on your Quest that you can interact with your pet in. We also have a Twitch integration coming in the first part of the year that will allow you to bring your pet onto your Twitch stream and let your audience interact with your pet. So right now, whereas originally we wanted to build Nintendogs, we're still building towards that, but we think that the space has to get to a bigger audience for that to make sense for us. So instead, we decided our better focus would be to show these small experiences that you can take your pet between, but also we're going to allow everybody access to our tech stack. So it's not just us building. Everyone who can build in Unity will be able to build experiences for these pets or bring them into their own Unity games.
Okay, so now we're getting into some interesting territory. You definitely hit off the nostalgia factor, just sneaking in Nintendogs there.
25 million people play Nintendogs, and they're trapped.
Yeah, I mean, it's addictive. It's so good.
Yeah, totally. And we're building one of those experiences as well. One of the next things that we're going to be delivering, which we haven't talked about yet, is going to be basically that a caring experience, but you'll be able to use it kind of wherever you want to use it. It'll exist server side, so you'll be able to take care of your pet. So it's all of these iterative experiences. And what we hope to learn is what people want to do with their pets. Before we shove everything at the audience, we want our community to develop with us. Tell us what you like. Did you like the AR? Do you want more AR? Do you want more VR? The Twitch thing, is that what's resonating with people? We want to figure out where people want to bring their pets so that we can develop more of that.
Most of these games, when we were growing up, at least for me when I was growing up, what made them so successful is, they give the ability to be creative to the user. So, I mean, if you think about Little Big Planet, for example, they have so many incredible worlds that you can work on and you can join that actual community members just made on their own time, right? If it could go two either ways, right? Whether you have the team itself building out these extremely curated worlds, or you give the users the ability to create these worlds and, allow each other to enjoy these experiences. So it is very interesting the route that you could take with this.
Yeah, I'm going to post a video on the questions channel from YouTube. This is we called it Pet Jam. Basically, I asked one of our lead engineers to take a day off from everything else and take our tech stack and a credit card on the Unity store and create something different with the same, with these pets. That wasn't like one of the other experiences I just talked about. And so she basically created this sort of weird, almost like Katamari Damacy thing where the cats were running around the environment, gathering up other cats as they went. And she did this in a matter of handful of hours using our tech stack plus the Unity asset store. And the point of this was to show how someone who knows how to use Unity will be able to use our metadata information to create other types of experiences. And you can use as much or as little as you want, because this is the problem that most people point out with interoperability is that games all have their own art style. And so it wouldn't make sense to take a skin from Call of Duty and bring it into Tomb Raider. And I saw this said loads of times last year on Twitter. And no, it wouldn't. That's really stupid, obviously. But if you think of these pets as metadata, as blueprints, like the Loot Project, as opposed to saying they have to look this way, then you start to get away from that problem. And you say, okay, my game is anime. They need to look anime. Well, that's fine. You can take our tech stack for free. You can use what you want, and then you can fork off and you can make it look Disney and anime. And so that's where, if you start to think differently about these things, it becomes possible. But you have to think of things as data, and you can't think of it so regimentedly and say it has to look this way. It has to be defined by this asset on the blockchain. It's better to actually say, here's what it might look like. What does it need to look like in your world?
Got it. Yeah. Again, just providing the tools in order for you to incorporate all the different assets or aspects to create the asset that you want to build. Exactly. Yeah, I totally hear you on there.
And you might even create something different. Like our white paper talks about, imagine if you wanted to create a racing game. And imagine there are 1 million people out there with Petaverse pets. Imagine if you just wanted to allow them to come into that racing game, and all you looked at was how fast they were, whether they're agile or clumsy, and what their elemental ability was. And you could just mine that information to bring them into an experience. It wouldn't even be a cat game, it'd be a racing game. So I think that that's really interesting and exciting. I'm really excited to see what our community is going to do with our tech stack.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sky's the limit on that, right? So let's dive into, are you guys planning? I know you mentioned that you're going to leave majority of the direction up to the community's feedback and decisions, but do you guys currently have any plans on developing worlds or developing environments, events, to start rolling it out as soon as once the cats are out? Like what is the idea there?
We have a rich roadmap for next year. I think one of the things that game developers bring to Web3 is the notion of a live roadmap. I think there's been an issue with some projects who are kind of like trying to release everything at once, or using an NFT sale to raise money and then promising something eventually. We sort of took the hybrid approach of saying we're not going to release anything until we have utility. And so that's what we're doing. We're about to do our mint, and we're going to instantly bring utility. And then we have projects that will, like the VR experience, that will come out sort of month after month after month as we go forward. And so this year is going to be, in my mind, jam-packed with releases of experiences, small experiences that you can have with your pet, the next pet, breeding, and so forth. And so my hope is that that's what's going to keep our community engaged and keep everyone excited and, keep the floor price, healthy and so forth. As opposed to trying to launch too much at once. I think it's really important to get feedback to develop in public, which isn't to say, there's a fine line there. You can't really develop by committee. And so it's really, and I feel really strongly that we want the community's feedback, but I want to make it clear when we're ready to take feedback, because sometimes you're just simply not. It's an art creating games. And sometimes, you're not open to feedback. And I think we need to make that clear too, because people get jaded when you ask them their opinion and then you ignore it, So yeah, we have a lot of things coming this year. I think in the long term, we may think about something bigger, like a metaverse of pets. But I think that the problem with the metaverses right now is there isn't a lot to do in them. And that's not a slight on the metaverses. I'm friends with a lot of these projects. It takes time. It takes time to build up a user base. It takes time to build up enough content. It takes time to create a sandbox of things to do. And so that's why we decided the better focus would be on the plumbing, the subway system to get between the metaverses. How do we do that? How do we make it possible to take your thing with you wherever you want to go? As opposed to focusing, yet on those sort of, end places where you bring them, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it makes sense. Yeah, our in-house metaverse architect, 6 Mil, he made me realize how long it takes to build these worlds. So I totally hear you on that end. It's not something that comes very easily.
The good thing is, everyone, there's a lot of, hand-wringing this year for good reasons about the market. And there's this, when are all these games coming? A lot of companies raised money at the end of last year, the beginning of this year, before things turned. And so I do think there's going to be this sort of renaissance of stuff coming, but we have to be a bit patient for it because, they do take time. And I've seen, traditional game developers get really wounded talking to VCs, especially last year, who were hurrying them to get something to market. And it's like, you can't hurry this stuff. It's just going to take time. And so that's why I think the most important thing we can be doing right now is figuring out how to get between them.
Interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I like the direction that you're going because it can take different approaches, right? Like you mentioned Nintendogs, that's one approach, right? Mm-hmm. Thinking, Tamagotchi is another approach, right? Where you can have physical items that are tied to your metaverse asset.
Yes, definitely.
Neopets, right? Like there's a lot of different things that you can do with it. I mean, even like far-fetched, like Club Penguin, right? Like you get
and all that supports the same pet. If you have this digital asset and you make it resilient to changes in technology, to changes in blockchains, to changes in art style and so forth, then you can build all of these things, which is what's so exciting. And it's always yours. And you don't have to lose it when technology moves on,
Yeah. I mean, you're telling somebody that spent way too much money on skins. So I totally get it. It's amazing that, we're not too far away down the road where, we'll start to see assets that you can incorporate into games that have been evolved to or passed on to new games, right? Yes. Which is important for the gamer ecosystem.
Definitely.
Oh, I think you got rugged there.
Oh no.
Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you, Poppy. I think Susan might have gotten rugged.
Well,
let's see if she comes back in here.
Let's lose everybody. Am I still there?
Yeah, we hear you loud and clear.
It's like rugging there.
Hey, it ain't a AMA without a rug.
Yeah, I thought it was you. Now I'm thinking it was me. What I was saying is art styles are going to change as technology progresses, as glasses, AR glasses are going to come out. They're going to be capable of, vastly superior fidelity to what we can support now. And so all these things now that help us to be interoperable between games also help us to be resilient to changes in technology and mean that this can be an heirloom that you pass on, to your kids and grandkids and so forth.
Got it. So I do got to ask, do you guys have a specific chain that you are leaning towards closest to start off?
Yeah, we're going to be launching on Ethereum. And that was a big journey for us, over the course of the last sort of, 18 months. We originally were going to launch on Flow. Then we considered Polygon, and then we landed on the fact that, especially with the merge, we decided this pre-merge as it was coming, that our Genesis collection should be on Ethereum. But we do plan to support, all these other blockchains. The thing is, there isn't that much content there yet on Polygon, on Solana, on Immutable for it to be relevant today. Where it's going to start becoming relevant is over the course of the next couple of years as games, build on those different blockchains. And that's where we'll continue to add support for these other blockchains in terms of cloning. But the Genesis collection is going to be on Ethereum.
Right. And I will say Polygon has done a great run.
Totally.
They have a great stride. Their development team, their BD team is like unbelievable. They're partnering with everyone under the sun. Which is amazing to see, right? Like we do need those partnerships. We need that visibility for everyone in this space.
I agree. I think it was really interesting that the DeGods move this week, to supporting Polygon. I was on a space with Frank and Kevin today where I said that this is a really good thing for the space. One of the reasons we're launching on Ethereum is because there's never really been a blue chip project on Polygon. And we're I may have a long history in games, but we're new to Web3. And I don't think we were the project that was going to make that crossover happen. But I think they have the potential to help that to happen so that in the future, projects can just make a decision as to where they want to be, as opposed to the assumption that it's got to be on Ethereum if you want this to be a blue chip project. So I think it's good that we start to see some big projects make moves like that.
Amazing. Are you guys thinking about partnering with other communities or metaverse platforms? Have you discussed any teams? Are you currently in talks?
So Sebastian Borget at Sandbox is one of our advisors, and so we've always said that we plan to support Sandbox. We're close with the guys at Nifty Island and plan to support Nifty Island. There are a bunch of other games and experiences that we're talking to, both Web 2 and Web 3. We're a 25-person team, so we really kind of had to focus first and foremost on the things that we were building and getting this first launch out. But as that is now about to happen, now our focus is going to turn to a few things, including documenting our tech stack to make it easier for somebody else to also build with it, and sort of picking these first couple of use cases where we can handhold a bit, to make it possible. And then obviously building the next couple types of pets.
That's amazing. Thank you. I think that's most of the questions that I had for Petaverse. I definitely want to dig into your background in Rockstar Games, 2K, which I still can't believe. I partook in all of these games, really, like GTA, Bully, BioShock was a very big game for me, Borderlands as well. It's incredible to be able to even have a conversation that has worked on something that, I've enjoyed very much so. So tell us a little bit about what your involvement was with 2K. Now, you mentioned that you did the signing of BioShock. So were you there to pitch the initial idea? Were you working with these teams on a directional level, or more so just closing the deals for the IP that was being worked on?
When we started 2K, at the time, Take-Two was really mainly just Rockstar. That was 90% of the company's business, if not more, 95% probably. And we were getting beaten up by Wall Street for the fact that that's all Take-Two knew how to do. So I was charged with basically, the long story short is putting new things together. So me and a couple colleagues and the CEO of Take-Two started figuring out what we were going to do with a variety of our businesses and how we were going to meld them together. And I had this really fun job of going out and talking to people who were doing cool things and going out to them and saying, look, Take-Two has a lot of money. We want to put this new label together. Rockstar had been very driven by what Sam Houser wanted to do. Instead, we were going to take the opposite approach and say, what do you want to do? We'll give you a fair deal. We'll share IP rights with you and so forth. And so that's how we were able to attract a lot of really great studios. I knew Ken Levine from his prior projects. He'd done a game called Freedom Force. And I forget what the heck his game was before that. So we've been talking for a while. And he came to me about BioShock. And nobody was signing it. It's funny. I've met so many folks in the game industry over the years since then who were doing biz dev at other publishers who were like, oh, you're the one who took BioShock away from us. Loads of people had the opportunity to do it. I looked at it. Take-Two had a great attitude back then that I think Ryan and I fostered, which was, you have to move quickly if you're not going to be the biggest company. And so we had to trust our instincts a lot. And my instinct about BioShock was that, Ken had been waiting for years to make a sequel to System Shock. And I didn't think he would screw around with that. I mean, to be quite honest, I thought that there was no chance, given that opportunity, that he wasn't going to make something great. And so that's why we signed it. We were the only people willing to sign it at the time. And, obviously it ended up being tremendous. BioShock, we were impressed with Brother in Arms, which Gearbox had done before that. And so we had a meeting at E3 where they pitched me on two concepts. The other one was a buddy cop game, and the other one was Borderlands. And we signed it a couple weeks later off the back of just a 10-minute verbal pitch. And it was called Pandora's Box or something like that at the time. But that's how Borderlands came to be. We got the Civilization IP from Atari while so many publishers were in there doing due diligence on it. We were just like, look, it's the only PC game that sells. And we handed Atari a $20 million check, and we took over Civilization. They threw in XCOM as a freebie, and then we bought Firaxis. So it was this really wild period of time. It was like around 2005, 2006, when we put this together. We bought Sega Sports, and that's why we called it 2K Sports, was because the sports brand, which became kind of the cornerstone of what we were building at 2K.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I want to say like mid to later 2000 years where they created one of the most of the influential games that influence today's games, right? Like most of these games that came out during that time are not used as like a reference point, right? People will
it became
like,
harder for game publishers to take risks, honestly, is what happened. When we were there, we were able to take these sort of shoot from the hip risks on projects. And then it got very bogged down in P&Ls and comparables and stuff. And the point of original IP is nobody's done it before. And that's what makes it special, and that's what makes it awesome. And that's a really hard risk for a big public game publisher. And so in my mind, that's the reason why you haven't seen a lot of new things signed at 2K since I left. I left there in 2007. The games that I'm talking about are still what 2K is known for, which isn't to say they haven't signed anything since then, but not a lot. It's really hard to take risks on new IP. And so I think you're absolutely right. I think that was a period of time where a lot of new risks were being taken. It was a brand new PlayStation that came out around then. And that's always the time to invest in new IP. And now, with this PlayStation iteration, there were too many other things going on. There's mobile games. Now there's Web3 games. There's so many things happening that the investment, I haven't seen the investment happen so much in original IP. And so perhaps it's that.
yeah, I mean, even in today's world, I feel like we're now seeing original IP come out through exclusives, mostly through Sony. But aside from that, it's usually just like indie teams making amazing games, but they just take a lot longer time to.
Which is great, isn't it? Like there was when I got involved in video games, it was like that. There were these small projects that could take off. Like I'm talking like Serious Sam. If you remember Serious Sam, that was one of the games. Yeah. Right. And you could do those sorts of games. And then the guys that started gathering the developers, Mike Wilson and crew, who ended up starting Devolver, in recent years, which has been tremendously successful. They went through this period where they just couldn't compete. They wanted to do really cool indie stuff. And they started a company called Gamecock and doing the same sort of thing. And it didn't work because it became this period where this is like the mid 2000s, like around 2007, 2008. That you kind of had to spend a lot of money. You were either a budget game or you were like a BioShock, plus sort of level game. And there was no middle ground. And now there's a middle ground. And I think that's why on the indie side, you're right. That's where you see the innovation, because it is possible to do Stardew Valley, one guy for a few years, not sleeping, and have that be a big hit. And there was a period of time where that just wasn't possible.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned Evolver, I looked them up again to remind myself kinds of games that they're publishing. And I just remember they just recently published Cult to the Lamb, which was a hit this past year. It's been doing absolutely amazing.
So many hits. Mike Wilson's a really great guy. And so I love to see that they kind of came back into themselves. I think he's gone from there now. But, doing that sort of indie, just having an eye for these like diamonds in the rough was what he was always good at. So it's really cool to see that kind of, came back again. And I think Devolver has become kind of the benchmark of like indie game publishing.
Yeah. So are you most excited for these indie teams that are going to be releasing games let's say next year, within the next 2 years, or more so AAA gaming studios that are trying to either build original IP or continue a game?
I think I'll always be more excited on the indie side these days because I think that, going back to the reasons I said, you're not seeing a lot of new console IPs coming out. So it's just, Call of Duty 5020, sort of thing. I'd rather see.
I hear you. Yeah.
I'd rather see new things emerging. And so for me, that'll always be more exciting.
Yeah, I recently got involved into indie gaming just because of Hollow Knight. Like that opened my world to indie gaming. And like all these small teams that are working on games that are amazing. Some of them deserve like indie game of the year.
And some of them take ages to hit. Like I forget the name of the game, but it was like Toy Story in a. Do you know what I'm talking about? It was like a shooter.
Oh yeah, the action. Yeah, it's like a action figure shooter. It's insane.
Yeah, it took like 2 years for that to hit. No one had heard of it until someone mentioned it on Twitter, and all of a sudden it was a success. And it was like, I don't know, it was a really small company, and it's cool to see stories like that. Because I've been there. It's really it's hard to launch something and have nobody know about it. And so it's always really heartwarming to see a story like that where the right person noticed it and it went viral.
Yeah, I remember now. The game is Hypercharged Unboxed.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, it was incredible. For those that don't know, so the game we're talking about right now, Hypercharged Unboxed, it was built by a small team, and the basis of the story is you are action figures fighting against all these other toys. So like, it could be like little green toy soldiers. It could be like other action figures that are coming to attack you, but there's like different locations to fight at. So like, there's like, it looks like settings from Toy Story. So like you're at a toy store, you're in a kid's bedroom and it's like all messy and there's like blocks everywhere and like sand castles and it's a lot of fun. But most of these games don't see the light of day just because they don't have the visibility that these bigger studios have.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jacob. Among Us has been around for a long time, and it took off, I think, like at the beginning of COVID.
100% true. Yes. It totally took ages to take off. And people discover these things and think they're brand new and don't realize that, the developer had to, scrap together for a couple of years to get to that point.
Yeah, so I mean, we have to ask you since you're already here. Bully 2, like when is it coming? Do you got any insider scoop? We need to know.
Well, I wish, it nearly got killed. So the story there is they were going to shut down, it was called Barking Dog, which became Rockstar Vancouver. And I think it has shut down since then. So the team doesn't exist anymore. And they were going to kill the product. And so my husband had to move up to Vancouver for a year to redesign the project. And, it was always meant to be school days. I remember when they started working on it that Sam and Terry just loved school days. And that was the genesis of why they made that game. But it really struggled for a long time and it very nearly was killed. It went from being nearly killed to being a big highlight of E3 that year. So I don't know. I'd love to see a follow-up. I mean, I know Lee really enjoyed working on it and it was a great game. And it's one of those games where you're like, oh God, Bully, I remember that. It's not like GTA that everybody knows it, but it's like Bully. It's like everybody really, there's a lot of respect for that game, which I know that Lee is, very gratified by.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely saw a video. It could have been actual concept art or inspired concept art, but it looked amazing, right? And it was like the continuation of the story, and he is, a lot older now. And
it's cool. I did not know that. I'd love
yeah, again, how game leaks are. They're either fake or very nice fan made ones.
The concept artist on Bully was a guy named Steve Olds, who's awesome. He's long since gone from Rockstar. He was super talented.
Yeah, so this is incredible. I mean, your experience at both of these companies has been something amazing to contribute to, especially working with Petaverse, right? Like the possibilities are endless. Do you think that we're going to see more gaming companies, traditional gaming companies, entering Web3 without them advertising that it's Web3, right? I think it's going to get to a point where you're just going to be playing a game, and that component is Web3 technology, but they're not really advertising it that way. Do you think that's something that's going to happen?
I do, because it depends on why you're in Web3. The core of what we're doing is something that, it's treating Web3 as a database. It's a place that you're storing information and you're making it, permanently yours with provenance and so forth. None of that is specifically turning it into, liquidity or securities or, the other reason that, people are also into Web3, which is all fine. The point of owning something is you can sell it. And so that's cool. But when we start to move the conversation away from the selling part of it and the fact that it unlocks all this possibility, and that if you get bored with the game, you can move on, that you can cash out. My 14-year-old spends a lot of money on Fortnite. I would love if when he eventually gets bored with Fortnite, could get rid of all that, the crap he's been buying for years that, he doesn't really care about anymore. Every time a new skin comes out, it's the end of the world. And then he forgets about it a week later. So it'd be great if he had the ability to sell those things off. And so, all that existed in Web 2, it just in a different, less smart contract way. I played a lot of MMOs when back in the day. I remember when people started selling off their EverQuest accounts on eBay. Web 3 makes it easier to be able to do that, and so there are certain efficiencies of Web 3 that will resonate with people in Web 2. The notion that we've been renting our stuff for years and now we can own it. As we make these things interoperable, as we give access to the underlying assets and stuff, that's the stuff that's going to resonate. And so, yeah, I think that the conversation needs to evolve, and the sort of stuff that we talk about in Web3, floor price, rugging, all this stuff needs to sort of start to smooth away and sort of become more mass market terminology so that the average person understands what all this means. I saw Jonah Blake the other day talking about we shouldn't be, marketing this stuff to kids. It's like, no, I think we should, just not yet. When this becomes a custodial wallet purchase, I like to think of it as like a pre-NFT. I imagine in the future, we're going to have our Nintendogs game, and someone's going to go in there, and they're going to be able to build the exact pet that they want, and it's going to be really basic and like a tabby cat, and they'll be able to use it, and then they'll find out that, I could take this out and bring it into the VR game. That's interesting. And I can mint this if I want to with my parents' permission, and it becomes an NFT. And if the parent has control over all those things, I don't think that has to be a bad thing any more than any other purchase has to be. It's just it has this baggage associated with it that it's all about scams and stuff. But we just need to move beyond that. And so I'm really excited about the coming years and 2023, that I think we're going to start to move that direction. I think people are going to get more comfortable with this, and they're going to understand that there's so much more to this than just, like liquidity and flipping stuff. And it's understandable to not think it's more than that, because it hasn't been, but as soon as we start to show utility, just like an MMO, there's going to be stuff that's going to make you want to hold on to it and be involved in it and keep it. And so the space is going to naturally evolve because of that, in my mind.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just to like even attribute, right? So like, let's say you've bought all these skins, right? Like you can't take it back. They've got your money. Like, yeah. Imagine just if they went back and they said, all right, if you bought any of these skins from this point backwards, you can actually claim it. We're going to give it to you, or, you could redeem it in your wallet. Like, I mean, just looking at the people I play League with, like they'd make bank. And that's not even to think about like Fortnite, right? Like Fortnite's market would be insane if you're allowing skins from season 1.
Yeah. And that's the thing. People are always skeptical of business models in video games. And I think that what gamers need to understand is that this gives them leverage. If I'm not happy with what's going on in a video game, if the pricing is getting manipulative, or if my character keeps getting nerfed and I don't want to be a part of this anymore, you've got the right to walk and sell it to somebody else who wants to be there. That's the power that you don't have in Web 2. In Web 2, if you don't like the game or you're unhappy with the direction that Epic goes with Fortnite, you still spent the time, you still spent the money, and it's going to be locked there if you leave. So, I think that's really powerful. And I think that's what will help us. Like, gamers don't trust Web3 by and large, but the reason was the wrong messaging. Like last year was so focused on GameFi and tokenomics and play to earn mechanics and Axie Infinity and stuff. But none of those were about the game. They were just about, I mean, like think about it. It's crass. It's like we're gonna pay you to want to be here. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean just means the game sucks? Is how most gamers would perceive that. And so it's not to say that you can't have play to earn mechanics in a game, but the game has to come first. First, the business model should be sort of the second thought. It shouldn't be where you start.
Yeah, because then your view is skewed, right? Like you're trying to appeal to an entirely different goal or conversation, right? Like the people that made Axie Infinity were, they obviously had an agenda on plan, and it was to make money on this game. Right.
Yeah.
It's not fun. Like it's not like incredibly fun to play these games so much. Right. Like you get bored or burned out. But I mean, again, we've talked about these games, but if you make them available to Web3, like that are actually fun, like if Elden Ring was, let's say that your characters could be sold on the market, like, oh my goodness, it would just be unbelievable, right? Like you'd see all different kinds of characters being built and new metas coming out depending on items. Like, there's a very exciting conversation behind all these things, but it all really just comes down to, is your game fun, right? Like is your game actually providing something that people are going to enjoy? And
we need to
that's
make
where I get stuck.
We need to make it. We need to make Web3 a space that feels welcoming to the game development community. And, the more the focus is on specifically things, associated with security on floor price and tokenomics and stuff like that, the more game developers just get freaked out. They don't understand that it's a whole different language. It's a whole different world. It's the reason none of them are on, crypto Twitter or anything else. And so somehow we need to find a way to get to a common ground, because it's good for everybody. It's good for Web3 if game developers take it seriously and build great content. And it's good for game developers too, because I definitively think that Web3 is the future and it unlocks so much power for us as creators. And so, somehow everyone has to get on the same page. And I kind of hope that the bear market this year is going to get us towards that, because, it's trimmed the fat, right? It's trimmed away the easy minting and the easy selling out and stuff. And we've had to really focus on quality instead and content. And so I think that that's kind of a good thing. It feels like a bad thing sometimes, obviously, but it's probably by and large a really good thing for the industry.
Yeah, I think that, experiencing the rugs in 2021 made 2022 a lot harder to get rugged. It was extremely easy to do it last year, right? And I think as time progresses, things and people are going to be more aware of, well-known scams. But I mean, last year it's just like nobody knew. So like you get a DM from Metaverse, like, oh my God, they're about to mint out. I got to go get one, right? Like it was so easy to get somebody that's naive to just get scammed. So I think, developing processes and, bigger names getting involved into this will make it easier for the general public. But, I think we're still very far away from that reality.
Yeah. I think, founders and developers need to be accountable and to sort of, the reason, we're doing so many AMAs right now is, I've told people who are coming into our Discord, we're getting a lot of collaboration requests, only if we can talk to everybody. Like, and I don't say that in an arrogant way. I'm like, I want people to get on our whitelist for the right reason. Because because otherwise, what's the point of it? If we're getting in people who are here short term just because they want to flip their cat, they're not here. They're not really buying into the long term vision of the project. And that's what we want. I want people to have eyes open, read the white paper or listen to the white paper, and understand exactly what we're building and be in it for the ride. That's really important to me, and I think it should be important to all founders. It shouldn't just be about building a quick whitelist and getting done with it. Like we've really been thoughtful and methodical about how we've been, building our community and the whitelist.
Yeah, that's something that I definitely learned from Jake and Mitch. They're both very in tune with the community. They take time to connect with one another, and they don't take us for granted. They spend a lot of the time getting to know about us, checking up on us, making sure that we're all good. So it is important to build that community aspect. That's something that, is very, very big for us here.
Because we're all going to
Metaverse
screw up,
HQ.
right? Like the nature of business is we all screw up, especially right now, and you see it constantly happening. But I think what separates the great founders from, the weaker founders is that you have the trust of the community and that people are willing to hear, hey, you know what, we did this, it probably wasn't quite the right thing, and this is how we're going to fix it. Like, what Artifact just went through, where they're, it seemed to me anyway, like they were listening and out there, and people were willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe things didn't go perfectly, but here's why we did what we did, and here's what we're going to do next. And I think that that's really important, that you have a community who's willing to sort of roll with it when, inevitably there are going to be some missteps.
I have got to show you something that I think you'll appreciate.
What's that?
Give me 1 second. Okay, so I just dropped it in Office Showers chat.
Okay.
Our president, Poopaloop, creates this amazing magazine, and most of these authors are from the community, right? So you get to hear these stories from either community members interviewing OGs, talking about new projects, talking about what everybody's talking about. And, these things usually aren't easily done or capable if you don't have, leaders that are tapped into your community and what they want specifically, right?
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and we put these out every month. They're like, think of like our Game Informer, right? Like it's just everything on NFTs that you could learn that happened that specific month.
Oh, awesome. Love it.
Yeah, so I mean, this was an amazing conversation. I've pretty much ran out of questions. I wanted to see if there was any questions in guest questions. Looks like we answered everything pretty much. Did you have any final thoughts? Anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to talk about or leave us on?
So, like I said, I really encourage everyone to read the white paper. It talks at length about the specificities of cross-chain interoperability and how we see it. It talks about cloning, which essentially is the way we think about cross-chain interoperability is the way a game developer would. Imagine if Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo all played nicely together. This obviously isn't going to happen, and allowed you to share a save file across all the consoles, so that regardless of what console you run on, you are still accessing the same save. That's what we think Web3 will allow. Is essentially, even if you minted your pet on Ethereum, we want to let you use it everywhere. So if games suddenly become very popular on Polygon or Solana or IMX or Avalanche or whatever, we will give you a passport, we call it, to use your pet on that other blockchain. And so that isn't a tradable or sellable NFT. It's a copy and it's non-tradable. And if you sell your original pet, you lose access to the clones as well. But what that means is that you can use your pet in all these different places at once and still have it access the same metadata, which can change over time as you bond with your pet, as it develops more agility, or it becomes more clumsy, as it forms memories of how it problem solved, as it collects an inventory. All of those things you'll be able to use everywhere your pet has a passport to use it. And so I think that's really important in terms of how we think about not having to bridge. And again, eventually getting to a mass market, mom isn't going to want to bridge her NFT, but being able to get a passport and use their places, that's something that's a bit more mass market accessible, because we are thinking about the mass market future. And we talk about this metadata and how it's open to reinterpretation. And we also talk about the standard in there as well. The metadata defines their behavioral characteristics, their personality. It even defines things like their D&D moral alignment and their elemental abilities, and things like that. And that's really important. We basically tried to think of everything a game developer might want to know if they were going to bring these pets into other experiences. And so that's where the open standard came from. And it's going to evolve. The more we work with other teams who need other bits of information, the more we can start to evolve the metadata as well. And so I definitely encourage a read of that. It's all a bit heady stuff, but that's how we think about these pets and why we claim and believe they'll be resilient, for as long as you could possibly want to keep them.
Absolutely love that. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the conversation we had today
Okay.
on all topics gaming. Very excited to learn more. If anybody wants to learn more about Petaverse or learn more about you, is there active Twitter that you use?
Yeah. So our
Twitter.
Twitter,
Let's drop it in our
office
office
hours.
hours chat. Yeah.
Absolutely. So at Cummings SI is mine, and Petaverse Network is our company account, which is not letting me do. Those are our handles. And our website. And the white paper is up on our website. And we also have our Discord in here as well. Awesome. Thanks, Jacob, for that.
He is goated. Thank you, Jacob. Again, guys, if you need to get access to their links, they were posted on December 26th at 5:52 p.m. Eastern. That is December 26th at 5:52 p.m. Eastern. I want to take the time to thank all the listeners that came today. I see a couple cohorts. Appreciate you coming by. Thank you, Susan, for your time, and I wish you nothing but the best with Petaverse.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the holidays, and thanks for coming on the Boxing Day, as we call it over here in the UK.
Here now.
Awesome.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.